Every time I looked at her, she asked why. Jonas had always been a man of logic, grounded in the hard realities of space exploration. He spent his days charting unknown planets and navigating the stars, leaving behind the chaos of Earth. His ship, the Eclipse, was his sanctuary, a place where everything was clear, predictable, and mechanical. But everything changed when he landed on the planet Lyra, a world he had never intended to visit. The first thing Jonas noticed was the air. It wasn't like anything he had experienced before. It was thick with humidity, the scent of unknown flowers and wet soil. As he stepped off his ship, his boots sank into the soft ground. He looked around and saw towering trees, their leaves glistening under the soft light of two suns. It was beautiful but eerie, like a place untouched by time. Jonas was here on a routine mission, tasked with gathering resources and mapping the terrain for future human expansion. The inhabitants of Lyra were a peaceful race of aliens known as the Zara. Their technology was advanced, but they had chosen to live in harmony with nature, abandoning the rush of the outside world. Jonas had heard of them before, but this was his first time meeting any of them. As he ventured deeper into the lush forest, he saw movement ahead. At first, he thought it was just the wind rustling the leaves, but then he saw her. She was standing by a stream, her silver-white skin shimmering in the light, her hair long and flowing like liquid metal. Her eyes were large and glowing, a shade of purple he had never seen before. She wasn't like the others he had seen from his ship's observation window. There was something otherworldly about her, something that made his heart race. She turned to face him, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Their eyes locked, and Jonas felt an inexplicable pull toward her. His breath caught in his chest. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice a strange melody that echoed in the air. Jonas blinked, not sure if he had heard her correctly. "Excuse me?" The woman stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "Why?" she repeated, her voice tinged with something he couldn't quite place. Curiosity, desperation, he couldn't tell. Jonas felt his mind racing. What was she asking? Why did she want to know? He didn't even know her name. He wasn't sure if this was part of their greeting ritual or if she was just strange. He cleared his throat, trying to compose himself. "I don't understand. What do you mean, why?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if contemplating him. The silence between them stretched, and Jonas could feel his heart pounding in his chest. There was something about her, something deeply unsettling, and yet he couldn't look away. There was a pull, an invisible thread between them, something magnetic that he couldn't explain. The woman stepped back, her gaze still fixed on him. "Every time I look at you, I ask myself." "Why?" she said again, more softly this time, as though the question had always been there, waiting to be asked. Jonas opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had met many alien species during his career, but none had ever affected him this way. None had ever looked at him like that, like they were searching for something buried deep inside him. Before he could gather his thoughts, the woman turned and began walking away. Jonas stood there for a moment, frozen, staring after her. He wanted to call out to ask her what she meant, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. He watched her disappear into the trees, and for the first time in his life, Jonas felt completely lost. It wasn't just her beauty that had drawn him in, but something deeper, something he couldn't understand. For the rest of the day, Jonas tried to focus on his mission, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. Who was she? Why had she asked that question? And more importantly, why had it felt so important? As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the landscape, Jonas found himself back at his ship. He stood at the edge of the forest, looking out at the horizon, still unable to shake the feeling that something was different. Something had changed inside him. But what? And why had it been her? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. The days that followed Jonas's encounter with Lyra were filled with confusion and unanswered questions. Every time he thought about the strange alien woman, her purple eyes and soft voice asking, "Why?" echoed in his mind. He had come to Lyra for a simple mission, one that he thought would be just like every other. Yet this planet, its people, and most of all Lyra, had turned everything upside down. Jonas couldn't focus on his task. He had planned to spend the week mapping the terrain and gathering resources. But no matter how hard he tried, he found himself distracted. The moment he closed his eyes, he saw her face, her calm expression, her glowing eyes, and the way she had spoken to him like they shared some deep, unspoken connection. He wanted to understand what she meant. Why did she keep asking that question? It was late in the evening when Jonas found himself back in the forest, drawn by an urge he didn't fully understand. The air was cooler now, and the light from the twin suns had disappeared, leaving the world bathed in the soft glow of the stars. He knew he had no reason to go back, but something inside him told him to follow the path, to look for her once again. As he walked through the dense trees, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The quiet rustle of the leaves, the gentle hum of distant wildlife made everything feel alive. He took a deep breath, the air filling his lungs with the rich, earthy scent of the planet. It was different from Earth, but it was calming in a way he couldn't describe. After a while, he arrived at the same clearing where he had first seen Lyra. This time, she was already there, standing by the stream. The moonlight danced on the water, reflecting the pale light of the two moons above. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "You came," she said simply, as if she had been waiting for him. Jonas hesitated before speaking. I had to find you again. I don't understand. Why do you keep asking me that? What do you mean, why?" Lyra turned to face him, her purple eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "You're asking the wrong question," she replied softly. Jonas furrowed his brow. "What do you mean? I don't understand any of this. Why do you keep looking at me like that?" Lyra took a step forward, her gaze softening. "You don't remember, do you? Not yet." Her voice was almost a whisper, as if the words she spoke were not meant for anyone but him. Jonas's heart skipped a beat. "Remember? Remember what?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "It's not something you can remember yet, but you will." She paused, watching him closely. "You asked why yourself, didn't you, when you looked at me for the first time?" Jonas's mind was spinning. I didn't ask you that," he said, confused. "You asked me." Over and over. "Why?" Lyra's smile faded and she looked down at the ground for a moment. "Because it's what I've always asked. Every time I see you, I ask myself why you're here. Why this is happening again." She looked up, her eyes filled with something Jonas couldn't quite place, sorrow, maybe, or regret. "Why I can never seem to break free." Jonas took a step closer. "Break free from what?" From her face, he could see it now. She wasn't just some alien leader. She was burdened by something deeper, something tied to her very existence. She wasn't looking for answers about him. She was searching for answers about herself. "I don't know what you mean," Jonas said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I want to help you understand." Lyra turned away, her back to him, as she gazed at the flowing water. "There's nothing you can do," she said. "You've already done it." Jonas felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, her voice distant, "you're not the first one I've met, and I'm not the first one to ask you that question." Jonas blinked. "What?" Lyra closed her eyes, her shoulders sagging as though the weight of centuries was bearing down on her. "I have been here before," she said, her voice barely audible. "Again and again, every time I ask you why, I am searching for the same answer." Jonas's mind was reeling. "But that doesn't make sense. How is that possible?" Lyra's eyes met his again, filled with an ancient sadness. "Because I am not just one person, Jonas. I am a part of something much older than you or me. I have lived many lifetimes, many faces. Every time I encounter you, I am forced to ask the same question, and every time I find no answer." Jonas took a step back, trying to process what she was saying. "What are you talking about? Are you saying this isn't your first time meeting me?" Lyra nodded slowly. "It's not just you, it's the connection, the bond between us. We are part of a pattern, a cycle that never seems to end." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "But this time I need to know the answer. I need to break free from this endless loop." Jonas felt a wave of emotion wash over him, sympathy, confusion, and an overwhelming desire to help her. "But I don't know how to help you," he said, his voice hoarse. Lyra reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his arm gently. "You do, you already have." Jonas was about to ask her what she meant when a soft noise from behind him caught his attention. He turned quickly, but the moment he did, Lyra was gone, disappeared into the shadows as silently as she had arrived. Jonas stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been just moments before. The question hung in the air like a heavy fog. Why? Why did she keep asking it? Why did he feel this strange connection to her, a pull that he couldn't explain? His heart ached with the need for answers, but the more he tried to understand, the more elusive the truth became. He knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. He would find Lyra again, and when he did, he would get the answers he so desperately needed. No matter what it took, Jonas couldn't stop thinking about her. For days after their last meeting, Lyra's face, her voice, and that haunting question, "Why?" kept swirling in his mind. He had thought he could go back to his mission, back to his routine, but everything felt different now. Lyra no longer seemed just like any other planet. The mysteries here felt alive, and they were tied to something deeper than he could understand. His sleep was disturbed. Night after night, he woke up with the feeling that he was missing something crucial. He spent his waking hours wandering the forest, hoping to find Lyra again. But every time he arrived at the clearing where they had met, she wasn't there. The place felt different now, almost as if the land itself knew she was gone. As the days passed, Jonas's frustration grew. He had come to Lyra to do a job, and yet here he was, lost in a puzzle he couldn't solve. He wanted answers. More than that, he wanted to understand why her question affected him so much. Why did it feel like the weight of the universe rested on that single word? He found himself back at the village of the Zara people, hoping to speak to someone who might know more. He'd met a few of them during his time on the planet, but they had never seemed as connected to him as Lyra. They were a peaceful people, focused on balance and harmony with nature. But Jonas wasn't looking for balance anymore. He needed clarity. He needed something that could answer the question that had taken root in his mind. The Zara village was built into the side of a mountain, with homes made of stone and wood, blending seamlessly with the environment. The air smelled faintly of fresh rain, and the sound of birds echoed through the trees. Jonas walked through the winding paths, his mind elsewhere. He barely noticed the other Zara as they moved about their day, their eyes following him with a calm curiosity. It wasn't long before he found one of the elders, an older Zara woman named Zira. She was sitting outside her home, weaving something from vines and leaves. When she saw Jonas approaching, she looked up and smiled, her face lined with the wisdom of age. "Jonas," she greeted him, her voice soft but steady. "What brings you here today?" Jonas stopped in front of her, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I need to know about Lyra," he said, his voice urgent. "I've met her before and I don't understand what's happening. She keeps asking me, why, every time I see her. What does it mean?" Zira's expression softened and she motioned for Jonas to sit beside her. "Ah, Lyra," she said, her voice tinged with both affection and sorrow. "She has asked that question for a long time. It is not just a question for you, Jonas, it is a question for the universe." Jonas felt a pang of confusion. "But why? Why does she keep asking me?" Zira took a deep breath, her gaze distant as she looked at the horizon. "Lyra is not like the others of our kind. She is part of something ancient, something that has been lost in time." Jonas leaned forward, eager for more. "What do you mean?" Zira turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "The Zara people have always been in tune with the natural world, with the flow of time. But Lyra, she was born with a different purpose. She was not meant to live as we do. She carries the memory of something we can't understand, something that transcends even our own history." Jonas's mind raced. "But how does that explain what she's been asking me?" Zira closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "Lyra has lived many lives. Her soul is bound by a curse. She has been reincarnated countless times in many forms across many worlds. Each time she meets you, she asks the same question. Why? Because in each life she has been searching for the answer, and every time she looks at you, she believes you hold the key." Jonas's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean I hold the key?" Zira's gaze turned sad. "I am not sure, but I believe it is you, Jonas, who can break the cycle. She has been trapped for so long, unable to escape the question that haunts her. And now it is up to you to find the answer." Jonas sat in stunned silence. He had no idea what this meant, but the weight of it settled on his shoulders. Was he really the key? Could he truly help Lyra, or was he just a part of her endless search? Zira's voice broke through his thoughts. "I know it is difficult to understand. But Lyra's journey is one of great importance. The cycle that binds her is tied to the fate of our people, and to the fate of many others. You are not just a man, Jonas. You are part of a much larger story, one that has been written across the stars." Jonas stood up, his mind spinning with everything Zira had just told him. He didn't know what to believe anymore. How could he be part of something so big? He was just a space explorer, a man trying to do his job. As he walked back to the edge of the village, Jonas found his mind racing. He couldn't ignore what Zira had said. Lyra had lived many lives. Her soul was tied to something greater than herself, and now, somehow, he was involved in her story, whether he liked it or not. That night, Jonas lay in his bed aboard the Eclipse, staring at the ceiling. He thought about everything Zira had said, about the curse that bound Lyra, about the question that had been asked across time. Why? He thought about the way Lyra's eyes had looked at him, the deep, searching look that made him feel both honored and helpless at the same time. He wanted to believe that he could be the one to help her, to free her from the cycle that trapped her. But how? How could he be the answer to something so ancient, so complex? His thoughts drifted back to her, her face, her voice, her question. Why? She had asked him, but now the question was no longer just hers. It was his too. The stars outside his window twinkled brightly, and Jonas couldn't help but feel that something big was about to happen. He didn't know what it would be, or how he would be involved, but one thing was certain. He wasn't alone in this anymore. Lyra was waiting, and so was the answer. He just had to find it. Jonas woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in his chest. The conversation with Zira had left him shaken, and the truth she had shared about Lyra's past weighed on him more than he expected. He had always thought of himself as a man who dealt with problems logically, who could solve mysteries if given enough time and resources. But this was different. This was a riddle that had no clear solution, no neat answers. He could no longer ignore it. Lyra wasn't just any alien leader or mysterious being. She was a soul trapped in a cycle of rebirth, bound to search for something she could never find. And somehow he had become part of that cycle. The thought made him feel small and insignificant, like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. He wanted to help her truly, but how could he be the key to unlocking something so ancient? He was just a man from Earth, a simple explorer. The enormity of what Zira had said seemed impossible to grasp. Jonas decided he had to find Lyra again. He needed to know what she truly wanted from him. Was he the answer? Or was he merely a part of her endless quest, one that would never come to a resolution? He set out towards the forest once more, determined to find her. His steps were quick, though his mind raced with doubts. What if he was wrong? What if he couldn't help her after all? But as soon as the thought crossed his mind, he pushed it aside. He had to try. The forest was quiet as he walked through it. The same peaceful atmosphere from before still hung in the air, but there was a difference now. The trees, the leaves, even the wind seemed to know that something was about to happen. There was a strange energy in the air, something he couldn't quite place. It didn't take long for him to reach the clearing. The moment he stepped into it, he saw her. Lyra was standing by the same stream, her gaze fixed on the water. The sight of her stirred something deep inside him, a feeling he couldn't name but knew was important. She turned to face him as he approached, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was a quiet understanding between them, something that had grown between their encounters, like an invisible thread connecting their lives. Jonas felt it now more than ever. "You came," she said, her voice gentle, as if she had known he would. Jonas nodded, his throat dry. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the cycle, about the question you keep asking. I need to know. Why do you keep asking me? Why?" Lyra's eyes softened, and she stepped closer. "Because, Jonas, every time I see you, I feel a sense of recognition. But it's not just recognition of you as a person. It's something deeper, something that connects us across time, something that I cannot escape." Jonas felt his chest tight. "What do you mean? What is it about me? Why do I matter in this endless cycle of yours?" Lyra lowered her gaze, and for the first time, Jonas saw the weight of the centuries in her eyes. She had lived many lives, as Zira had told him, but in this moment, she seemed older than anyone he had ever known. "I have been searching for the answer for so long," she said softly. "But each time I meet you, I find no answer. I am left with the same question over and over again. Why do I have to live like this? Why do I have to keep asking the same thing, never finding peace?" Jonas felt a pang of empathy for her. The loneliness in her voice was unmistakable. She had lived so many lifetimes, each one ending in the same frustration, the same unresolved question. It was a burden no one should have to bear. "I don't have the answers, Lyra," Jonas said quietly, "but I want to help you find them. I want to understand why this is happening, why you keep being reborn into this cycle." Lyra looked up at him, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked in a shared understanding. She had always carried this burden alone, but now, in this moment, she didn't have to anymore. "I don't know why this happens to me," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But I do know one thing. The cycle can't end unless I understand my connection to you." And I fear that if I don't break free soon, I will lose myself entirely. Jonas reached out, gently placing a hand on her arm. We'll figure this out together. We'll find the answer, I promise. Lyra's eyes glistened, and for the first time, Jonas saw hope in them. You are the key, Jonas. I know it in my heart, but I don't know what it means. I don't know how you're the key or what I'm supposed to do with it. Jonas squeezed her arm, trying to offer her some comfort. We'll find out. I won't leave until we do. For a moment they stood there in silence, the sound of the stream flowing nearby, the quiet murmur of the forest in the background. It felt like the world had stopped for them, like they were the only two beings in existence. Jonas couldn't explain it, but he knew that this was important. Lyra's search for the truth had become his own, and he was ready to face whatever came next. The silence between them stretched on until Lyra finally spoke again, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. Do you believe in fate, Jonas? He thought for a moment before answering. I'm not sure, but I believe in our choices, and I believe that this connection we have, it's not by chance. Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps it's not. Perhaps this is something we are meant to do together. Perhaps together we can break the cycle. Jonas could feel the weight of her words settling over him. The cycle that had trapped Lyra for centuries could only be broken by the two of them together. And yet he still didn't understand why he had been chosen. Why him? I don't know what the answer is, he said softly. But I do know that we won't find it by running away. We have to face it, whatever it is. Lyra looked at him, and for the first time since they had met, her expression softened into a smile, a small but genuine smile. Then let's face it, Jonas, together. In that moment, Jonas felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just the promise of breaking the cycle or finding the answers. It was the understanding that, no matter what happened, they were no longer alone. Their fates were tied together now, and for better or worse, they would face whatever came next side by side. The question that had haunted Lyra for centuries still lingered between them, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like the beginning of something new. A journey that would finally lead them to the truth. The days after their decision to face the cycle together felt different. Jonas could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what they had promised each other. Lyra's presence beside him was no longer just a mystery he wanted to solve, but a partner in the journey to unravel something greater. They both knew the stakes were high, higher than either of them had imagined when they first crossed paths. But now they were no longer alone in their search. They were bound by the same question, and somehow together they would find the answer. The forest seemed to embrace them as they ventured deeper into the unknown. The usual peace of Lyra felt more alive now, like the land itself was watching them, waiting to see if they would succeed in breaking the endless cycle. The nights were calm, the days peaceful, but there was always an undercurrent of anticipation. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, Jonas and Lyra sat together by the stream, the same place where it all began. The sound of the water flowing seemed to echo in their minds, a steady rhythm that mirrored the beat of their hearts. The air was cooler, but the silence between them was warm with understanding. Jonas had spent days reflecting on everything Zira had told him, the words about Lyra's past, her curse, and the endless question she carried, why, had haunted him. But now, with Lyra by his side, he realized he had already begun to answer that question, piece by piece. The answer was not something he could find by simply searching for it in the past. It was something they needed to create together in the present. Do you remember your first life? Jonas asked, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, thoughtful. Lyra looked at him, her purple eyes reflecting the last light of the day. I remember fragments, she said quietly. Visions of faces, places, lives lived and lost. But they are all scattered like pieces of a broken mirror. I cannot see them clearly. Jonas nodded, his mind swirling with questions. What if we're not meant to understand everything from the past? What if the answer is in what we do now? Lyra turned to him, her gaze intense. But what about the curse? The question I have been asking for centuries. How do we break free of something that has bound me for so long? Jonas placed a hand on hers, feeling the soft warmth of her skin. Maybe the question itself isn't the problem. Maybe it's the idea that we have to find the answer alone. Perhaps the answer is in being together, no longer searching for a solution in the past or the future, but in the present moment. In this moment, right now. Lyra stared at him, her eyes wide. You think the answer is here with us? Jonas nodded. Yes, I think the answer is in our connection, in the bond we share. You've asked why. Because you've been searching for something that has always been out of reach. But maybe it's not about finding the answer. Maybe it's about accepting that we don't need to have all the answers to live with purpose. Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time in a long while, her features relaxed. The tension in her body seemed to melt away, as though the burden she had carried for centuries was being lifted. I've been so focused on the question, she said softly. So focused on the past and the future that I never realized the answer was right here in the now. I have been searching for a reason to exist, but the reason was never outside of me. It was inside. Jonas smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in days. Exactly. The past doesn't define us and the future is still unknown. All we have is this moment. And in this moment, we have everything we need. Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes closing as she let the words sink in. When she opened them again, she looked at Jonas with a newfound sense of peace. Maybe I don't need to ask why anymore. Jonas squeezed her hand gently. Maybe you don't. For a long time, they sat in silence, the sound of the stream providing a steady backdrop to their thoughts. The weight that had hung over them for so long seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of calm. Lyra's search for answers, her endless cycle of reincarnation, no longer seemed like a curse. It was a chapter of her life that was now complete, and together they had closed the book. The stars above began to shine brighter as the night settled in. The two moons of Lyra hung in the sky, their light reflecting off the water in the stream. Jonas and Lyra sat side by side, no longer burdened by the question that had haunted them both. I never thought I would find peace, Lyra said, her voice quiet but steady. Not after all this time, but with you, Jonas, I feel like I have. Jonas smiled, looking up at the stars. Maybe we don't need to know everything as long as we're together. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder, and they both sat there in the stillness of the night. The cycle that had bound her for so long had finally come to an end. The question, why, no longer lingered between them because they had found something greater. The answer was love, trust, and the bond they shared in that moment. The universe had always been full of mysteries, but some questions, Jonas realized, didn't need answers to be understood. Sometimes the journey itself was enough, and sometimes the answers we seek are found not in the past or future, but in the here and now. Lyra had finally broken free from her endless search, not because she had found the answer to her question, but because she had learned to live without needing it. And Jonas had found his own peace, knowing that he had been part of that journey. Together they sat by the stream, the night unfolding around them as the world of Lyra continued on, forever changed. The answer to the question, why, was no longer a mystery. It had been answered in a way neither of them had expected, and yet it was perfect. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time it didn't matter. They were free to live it together without the weight of endless questions holding them back.